I'm back. All right, so what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about these antebellum reform movements, or the reform movements before the war. So you have the changes, again, that are brought about by this market revolution, this economic and social change that's occurring as a result of the War of 1812. It's bringing about drastic and, in some cases, really, you can't overstate the dramatic changes that are occurring in American society. So that brings about two different movements. One, the Second Great Awakening, and a religious movement that's striving for perfection in the individual, and then obviously it'll push into society. And transcendentalism, this idea that the individual and self-reliance are the most important things, and justice. So they have these two ideas, two movements that are kind of like pushing people to reform their society, okay? All happening at the same time. Remember, you can't study history in a vacuum. So you have the market revolution, that's going on, that's creating changes, and then you have this Second Great Awakening, and at the same time, transcendentalism. It's all mixing together, and now you have this explosion of reform. From temperance, trying to get people to stop drinking, that really motivates many of the other reform movements. You have Dorothea Dix and the asylum movement. She finds people in chains and tied to the walls in jails who are mentally ill, and she pushes the governments, state governments and the national government, to create an asylum system by which the mentally ill could, instead of being imprisoned like they were, put in some sort of hospital-like situation. You have prison reform, education reform with Horace Mann, and the McGuffey readers, which were readers that students used to learn how to read and write. And most importantly, not only that, but they also learned moral lessons. The book is filled with these little moral lessons about respecting your elders and doing the right thing by other people. So it was not only a way to learn how to read, it was also designed to teach kids the moral views of society. Also, significantly, you have the women's rights movement that begins in Seneca Falls in 1848. Seneca Falls, upstate New York, around Rochester, and makes a little bit of sense, like we talked about with the Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening is centered in that area between Buffalo and Albany in the burned-over district where all these revivals are happening, and now you have this women's rights movement that begins in 1848 in Seneca Falls. And they have a women's rights convention led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, and they write what's known as the Declaration of Sentiments, which they loosely base on the Declaration of Independence. All men and women are created equal. And it's the beginning of this women's rights movement. It's also a reaction to the changes that are occurring for American women during the market revolution. They're being forced into the homes and not really participating in the economic part of American society. So as a result, now they become the forerunners of social change. Because if you think about it, they're going to be the leaders of the temperance movement, they're the leaders of the asylum movement, obviously the women's rights movement, and there are going to be plenty of abolitionists who are women. So although the market revolution kind of takes them out of the economic sphere in American society, it pushes them into a new sphere, and that sphere is antebellum reform. Now, these reforms are all very, very important, but most importantly for our studies is the reform movement, the radical abolitionist movement. Now, you're going to study later on, the changes in abolitionism, but the key is to know in the 1830s, abolitionism changes dramatically. It goes from a more gradualist look at abolitionism, more legal look at abolitionism, to a more immediate look. When we talk about people like William Lloyd Garrison, who's really the, I guess you could say, the center of at least a white radical abolitionist movement. Garrison believes in the immediate, uncompensated emancipation of the slaves. He would be known as an immediatist. He doesn't believe it should wait, or you should, compromise. As a matter of fact, he doesn't believe in compromise, and that's what makes him so dangerous. And hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit more about that idea of, if you're not a compromiser, are you a danger to the society? So this is a little introduction to the antebellum reform movements and how they come about, and you'll get into a more in-depth study of each of the reform movements to kind of figure out, exactly what they were looking to do. All right.